Shocking truth about Consuelo Vanderbilt. In HBO's The Gilded Age, her real-life counterpart is most certainly Consuelo Vanderbilt, daughter of Alva Vanderbilt. The that Gladys Russell's character is inspired by the real-life story of Consuelo Vanderbilt. I did a video on who the real historical Alva Vanderbilt was during the time period of HBO's The Gilded Age, so if you want to know more you can find that in my channel list of videos. While researching the life of Consuelo Vanderbilt, I came across a shocking truth about Consuelo that no one seems to be talking about. In this video, I will cover Consuelo Vanderbilt's life story as well as reveal the source and information that provides a deeper look into Consuelo as more than just the sad heiress, forced to marry a man she did not love. Stay to the end of the video to get this new information. Consuelo's mother was Alva Vanderbilt, a remarkable woman in her own right who was also a domineering mother. Consuelo wrote an account of her life in a memoir called The Glitter and the Gold, in which she describes her upbringing at the mercy of a mercurial mother who insisted that Consuelo was not to think, and only do what she was told. From a young age, Consuelo was groomed to be married into European nobility, much like a trainer puts a filly through her paces. As author Amanda Mackenzie Stewart writes in her book, Consuelo and Alva Vanderbilt, The Story of a Daughter and a Mother in the Gilded Age. It's clear that from very early on, Alva decided that Consuelo would marry into the European aristocracy, and the British aristocracy in particular. She named her daughter after an old friend, Consuelo, Duchess of Manchester, the only duchess she knew at that time. She made sure Consuelo could speak, read and write French and German by the time she was 8. She ensured that Consuelo was well-traveled and highly educated. Consuelo reveals in her own book that her mother made her wear a steel brace strapped to her back and neck that would ensure perfect posture and that she had to endure long and lonely hours of private tutoring supervised by her mother. She was instructed in history, literature, mathematics, Latin and science by private tutors as well as in special small-scale classes for girls. Her long days were topped with music lessons and an hour of exercise in Central Park. The importance of good manners was relentlessly drilled into her, day in and day out. When Consuelo was 16, she met 29-year-old Winthrop Rutherford, a friend of her father's. He was a dashing gentleman, tall, handsome, and of so-called good stock, and Consuelo fell immediately in love. His feelings were mutual and the two had a brief courtship, which Alva did not approve of. Even though Winthrop was from a prominent, old money family, he just didn't fit into the plan Alva had for her only daughter. Even after Alva forbade the relationship, Winthrop and Consuelo still managed to meet and agree to a secret engagement the day before Consuelo was set to board a ship, along with her parents, to travel to Europe to be sold off to English nobility. Winthrop was also on that ship, but Alva managed to keep Winthrop from Consuelo throughout the entire 5-month journey. She made sure that her daughter did not send or receive any letters from Winthrop, and he was denied admittance to be anywhere near Consuelo. One thing to know is that it was not uncommon for American daughters to be married off to nobility during this time in history. They were called dollar princesses because they were essentially sold to cover the expenses of cash-poor European aristocrats in exchange for marrying into a bloodline that would be passed along to their children. And there were no better aristocrats than the English, who were at the top of the totem pole of European nobility in the late 19th century. In fact, in the British series Downton Abbey, Lady Cora Grantham, played by actress Elizabeth McGovern, was based on the real-life American heiress, Lady Almina, the 5th Countess of Carnarvon, whose vast dowry helped save Highclere Castle. In 1895 alone, 9 young American women were all married into the British aristocracy, including Consuelo Vanderbilt, Frances Ellen Work La Roche, Millicent Rogers, and Gertrude Vanderbilt Whitney. It was a trend that Alva eagerly embraced. Back to 16-year-old Consuelo, who was madly in love with the dashing Winthrop Rutherford. Consuelo attempted to battle against her mother's wishes to marry the targeted aristocrat, the 9th Duke of Marlborough, with the lengthy name of Charles Richard John Spencer Churchill, who went by the nickname Sonny, after his courtesy title of Earl of Sunderland. The Duke had a castle called Blenheim Palace that was in dire need of repair, which meant he needed the Vanderbilt money as much as Alva Vanderbilt needed her daughter to marry into nobility. Even as she was only a docile teenager who lived in fear of her controlling mother, Consuelo resisted as best she could while her mother cajoled, wheedled, begged, and then ultimately ordered her daughter to marry Marlborough. When Consuelo made plans to elope with her great love Winthrop Rutherford, she was locked in her room. Alva even threatened to murder Rutherford, but Consuelo did not give in. It was only when Alva took to her sick bed and claimed that her health was being seriously and irretrievably undermined by Consuelo's stubbornness, and only when she appeared to be at death's door did Consuelo give in. Alva made an astonishing recovery from her phantom illness and proceeded to plan the wedding that would be the talk of the town. Consuelo married the 9th Duke of Marlborough at St. Thomas Episcopal Church, New York City on November 6, 1895. She would go on to bear him 2 sons, an heir and a spare, as she famously called them. When the wedding took place, the press reported that Consuelo stood at the altar weeping behind her veil, and while everyone felt sorry for her, the Duke himself was also forced to give up his love back in England in exchange for $2.5 million. Which would be approximately $75.2 million in today's money. The forced marriage of Consuelo to the Duke of Marlborough has been the source of pity for Consuelo since she wrote and published her memoir called The Glitter and the Gold in 1952, but there is a bit more to the story. In her memoir, Consuelo reveals that while they were on their honeymoon in Europe, Marlborough heartlessly told Consuelo that he loved another woman and only had married her to save Blenheim Castle. History and perpetual readings of the incident have often elicited pity for poor Consuelo, but this enduring myth has recently been shattered with the publication of a biography of the 9th Duke, written by his great-grandson Michael Waterhouse, entitled The Churchill Who Saved Blenheim, The Life of Sonny, 9th Duke of Marlborough. In the biography, Waterhouse exposed a never-before-published letter, said to be long and despairing, that the Duke wrote in January 1901 to his lawyer. The letter details how Consuelo had told him, a few years into their marriage, that she was deeply in love with another man with whom she wanted to elope even though she was married to the Duke, and that man was none other than Winthrop Rutherford. It seems that Rutherford had come back into Consuelo's life 3 years after her marriage to the Duke, and that she had spent 2 weeks in a Parisian hotel with her illicit lover. But here is the kicker. It turns out that according to the great-grandson Michael Waterhouse, the Duke was actually devastated, and he even reluctantly gave his permission for Consuelo to explore this plan, only for Rutherford to decline to elope with her after all. Waterhouse writes that it is impossible not to feel the Duke's anguish expressed in the letter or to admire his great-grandfather's dignified efforts to do the right thing by his adulterous young wife. The truth is that both Sonny and Consuelo were unhappy in the loveless marriage that lasted 26 years and bore 2 sons. They were both known to have had affairs over the course of the marriage and were both relieved when they were divorced in 1921, and the marriage was annulled at the Duke's request and with Consuelo's assent on August 19, 1926. I think what is so shocking here is to find that Consuelo was much like her mother and that she had learned to manipulate the truth of her marriage, all for the sake of image. In her memoirs, Consuelo describes her marriage to the Duke as loveless and her husband heartless and caring only for his precious Blenheim. She paints herself as a victim, and the Duke as making no effort to even be civil to her. How I learned to dread and hate these dinners, how ominous and wearisome they loomed at the end of the day, she wrote. So what do you think? Was it unfair of Consuelo to not tell her husband's side of the story with some compassion, as to what he was feeling and how he was actually sympathetic towards his young wife's tribulations of the heart? Let me know in the comments below while I continue to finish up this video with how Consuelo's life went after the annulment. Quickly I'll end by telling you that Consuelo was able to marry for love when she married the dashing Lieutenant Colonel Jacques Balsan, a record-breaking pioneer French balloon, aircraft and hydroplane pilot on July 4, 1921. He had been a suitor of hers when she was a teenager in her mother's house in New York, and he had been in love with her even then. He married her immediately after her divorce from the 9th Duke of Marlborough. This was the gold of her 1953 memoir, where she told of a very happy marriage that lasted until Jacques' death in 1956. After many years living abroad, facing war in Europe and a harrowing escape from the Nazis by Balsan, the couple eventually returned to the United States to live out their years together. Jacques Balsan died on November 4, 1956 at his home at 1 Sutton Place, New York City. Consuelo Vanderbilt Balsan died at Southampton, Long Island on December 6, 1964. She was buried alongside her younger son in the churchyard at St. Martin's Church, Oxfordshire, England, very near her former home Blenheim Palace. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more videos on the many fabulous, fierce, and feisty women in history.